It did seem too early to do a 4th of July sermon, yet next Sunday will be the 5th of July. So I didn't want to do Father's Day, go back to Hebrews, and then 4th of July, and maybe we'll do one next week also. But today we will also give attention to God and history, God and government. Many years we look at separation of church and state. We look at biographies of great American leaders, Lincoln or Washington. I thought I would review Texas history today. It's been a long time since we did that. Now, I'm no expert on Texas history, but I read that very good book. You have the cover of the book. Here is the book. It's only 760 pages. And when we moved here, this was on PBS, also going down into the WT Library, WT Museum. I think I bought this at their bookstore. Fehrenbach or something like that would be his name. One habit I have in reading books is to underline any reference to God, church, Bible, and that's what we have done with this Lone Star history book. So if you will turn past the title page, a little biography of the author. And he's born in San Antonio, went to Princeton, but head of the Texas Historical Commission. And that's how he wrote that book on Texas and history. So if we'll put that aside and we come to the main thoughts for today, the quotations from the book. And I'll read quotation number 1. Family after family packed up their Bibles, old fiddles, rusty broadswords, pewter utensils, and bleak bourgeois ethical baggage, and set sail. Those who moved to Texas, those who settled Texas, brought Bibles with them, and they brought with them the Christian truths and Christian ethics of right and wrong. Don't know whether the researchers are correct or not. They say today 87% of Texas houses have Bibles with an average of 3. And my thought on that is, who are the 13%? Are the 13%, they're not around here that many, but are they agnostics, I would say, and maybe some Muslims that don't have Bibles, but 87% have an average of 3 Bibles in their house right now. And here, quote number 1, Texas started out with Bibles, 1820s and 30s, so an average of 3 today. Quote number 2, they were enormously self-disciplined, both by their Puritan ethic and their warlike borderer's life. They had 3 public virtues: thrift, because they had always been poor, and John Knox taught poverty was a disgrace. So thrift is number 1. Self-reliance, because in the new reformed world, every man felt himself something of an island. And industry, agreeing with St. Paul that a man who did not work should not eat. They interpreted the New Testament mainly as the moral destruction of aristocracy and beggardom. Reference here to John Knox and Puritans. Those who started Texas had a work ethic. All who have the ability to work should work. The middle class work ethic was not a royal attitude of, we have so much money, we should not do anything. They did not believe in begging either if a person were healthy. If they were able to work, they should be working. Continue with quote number 3, and it will be another quote about the Bible. A code that's practical and functional had almost no room for art as it had evolved in Europe, but for learning, or at least literacy. Each man and family head was expected to read and interpret his own Bible. They believed as a matter of right they should elect their own clergy and support no other. In these attitudes and the distrust of social rather than functional station, some historians, probably rightly, have seen the seeds of American class democracy. Not fitting in real well with the Europeans. Not really believing in a king that would not work. The Christian style was, we will interpret the Bible ourselves, and we will believe what we should believe. It says they were largely leaving Europe, and in the next phrases, they were not going back. Let's look at those. The two bottom ones near the bottom of page 1. They had turned their backs on the whole panorama of their cultural history. They retained only its tools and ethic, abandoning bishops and baronets, pageantry, paganism, and Bach. The world they abandoned was already a crisis of rationale stretching from, shall we say, Germany to Philadelphia, when they departed with their 17th century values intact. They were withdrawing from a European time and from ideas as remote from their experience as dance steps at Versailles or Hampton Court. They were not going to retreat. They were poised to attack a tough, hungry, numerous, riotous, culturally disciplined horde. They were moving out of a cultural time to devour limitless space. They had no banners, armies, or grand leaders, no real rationale for conquest. They had their long rifles, sad songs, their fiddlers, their gray beards, their chopping axes, and their gloomy view of life. And there are a bunch of names of common people settling. They weren't going back. They didn't want to have Hampton Court and Versailles dancing. They, kind of like people in this church, brought their Bibles, believed very much in working hard. Now we will continue with page 2, and we have a special reference in page 2 that those coming here were considered by others to be trash. That's what we'll stress there when we get to page 2 at the top. Foreigners entering the great frontier of Texas often could not help considering all the pioneer stock in the trash classifications. The dog runs, like their cabins, were crude. Scars on the soil and forest were raw. Many Texans who eventually became rich in the West kept right on eating cornbread and, shall we say, bacon until they died. Evidences of thrift, hard work, and resourcefulness abounded. Every family brought up its dirty children and let the half-wild cattle or pigs uproot their straggling fields. Thousands more instilled the old Protestant, later called the American work ethic. Work as an absolute virtue. Here we go again with our list. Thrift as holiness, and visible success of outward evidence of both. Like most Americans, North or South, the Texas were Puritans who were taught to equate cause with effect and to look at life as a battleground in which the best man won and the weak were despicable failures. So other people coming in, looking at the settlers, Texas settlers, but also all of them moving west. These people are trash. Even though they might have become rich, they don't act like it. They don't flaunt it around. They read the Bible. They call themselves, coming in the next quote, pioneers, moving in. I think a lot of us kind of like this today. I do not know what the elite think of people in West Texas, but they probably think that they're low class. What are they doing out there? Are they just eating common food even though they're rich? Do they live in common houses even though they're rich? They are thrifty, but they believe in hard work. And like Puritans, do what is right. Do what is right, and life is a battle, and we will fight for what is right. I'll go ahead and read the second quotation. It fits the same. This life was hard, dirty, terribly monotonous, lonely, damagingly narrow during the brutal years. Few of the Americans who later eulogized it would care to relive it. In other words, as they got richer, they didn't talk about how bad it was, but they didn't want to go back and do it over again. Section 3 is pioneers. Our kids, grandkids went to middle school at the Crockett Pioneers over there in Olson Park area. And the middle school sounds like the statement here, which is now the third quotation. Frontiersmen seemed to live with both an axe and a local newspaper in hand. And when there were a dozen pioneers with a few square miles, they pooled their small resources and began a school. These people lived worse than many European peasants, but they did not think as peasants. Their ethic did not permit it. Well, as soon as we had a few people living together, this is all of the West. Not just Texas, Michigan was this way too. As soon as a few people got together, they built schools. In the city schools, but also in the country. Schools all over the place. They worked hard. They kept up with the news, reading the newspapers, and they were not going to be ignorant like some of the poor people in Europe. We have a phrase coming here, beholding to no man. Beholding to no man is coming eventually. Beholding to no man means that you didn't owe them anything, that you're going to be independent, unselfish, free from obligation to others, and that's kind of the attitude. Beholding no man, we're going to be independent. We're not going to need an obligation. We'll obey the Bible, but we don't need to do what you say we should do outside the Bible. When I asked my grandpa why he moved from Holland to America not so long ago, he said, in Europe I would always be a tenant. In America I would own things. Over there I would have people telling me what to do. In America I would have freedom from the elite. We see the fourth one down. If you count 1, 2, 3, 4 on page 2, we have that phrase, beholden to no man. First sentence. Second paragraph there, number 4, he had no landlord to sap his ambitions or his fruit. The American pioneer historically was almost unique. He did not have to go west. He went to improve his lot. He intended to stay. The people left for ideological reasons, not to seek their fortunes. Therefore, few have any intention of ever returning. not going to go back. Kind of an attitude. I know Ken Adams likes John Adams. John Adams had to live in France, kind of being an ambassador. He did not like French wines. He did not like endless dancing parties. He wanted to be home with Abigail and the kids. He'd rather be around his horses and cows. And there's kind of an American attitude. Don't care so much about all the fancy stuff. Want to have my Bible. Want to do what I want to do out in the middle of nowhere and take care of wife, kids, and animals. Number 5 is another school quotation and another Bible quotation. Number 5, boys and girls went to school to learn essentials to fit them for their future life, not as a part of any planned social process. The graduate of a field school, that would say 6th grade or 8th grade, with a grade school education was completely fitted to extend American civilization as he knew it further west. Culture and philosophy were not Anglo-American concerns. Neither had any real function as a frontier where everyone had to work. An enormous amount of both was transmitted through the Holy Scriptures. That's where the main learning was, which were used as a text in most schools. And the Protestant or American ethic was preserved and enhanced also by these local schools quite unconsciously because it was the ethic and culture of the land. Teachers and pupils shared it and learned it before they even went to school. So, boys and girls, notice it's both. Boys and girls went to Texas from the time of the settling, and it was not so much culture and philosophy, it was Bible study. The Bible was the truth, and they learned it before they ever went to school. They were taught it at home. They were taught it in preschool. Now we have it in Sunday school and church, and even it seems on the news recently, a little more Bible study at school is at least an optional course. I think it should be optional, but I think it should be allowed, and the kids should be able to learn the Bible. Now, let's look at section 6, for the second one from the bottom. The historical role of the English Bible in Texas has increasingly been overlooked. But the King James Version afforded this stultified civilization on the fringes of the 19th century world a great part of the basic culture it required. It was then, in fact, almost the only literature most families possessed. Well, the first line is the English Bible has been increasingly overlooked of how important it was to start everywhere in the country, but start Texas is what they're reference to, increasingly overlooked of how much it matters. Most homes had only one book, no phones, no computers, no TV, only one book. Now, I don't know what they did all evening. I imagine they did some music, and I imagine they read the newspapers. But probably the Bible is the only book, and the only book that they needed. We come now to the last quote from the Texas history book. I have a little bit more after a review of the book, but the last quote from this Texas history book. It's at the bottom of page 2, and then we'll turn over to page 3. The Old Testament fitted easily into the 19th century Texas world. Its revelations of the human condition were held, even by the non-religious, to be entirely valid and timelessly true. the untexan read of evil that was ancient and ever present, requiring eternal discipline of man. He learned of false prophets, lying sycophants, licentious Jezebels, foolish kings, mighty warriors and wise men. He absorbed an unflattering impression of such intellectual tribes as scribes and Pharisees. Although few could articulate or explain it, Texas gained a timeless portrait of a man's world of the rise and fall of people and deliverance, God's patience and wrath, man's enduring inhumanity of man. Visitors were often surprised to find Texans who had no apparent cultivation to be able to strip vanities and euphoric philosophies from better educated men. As a cultural folkloric instrument, the Holy Bible played its part in a way no official history or intellectually fabricated philosophy ever could. So I circled again, the Holy Bible played its part. The Bible tells us to test the spirits because many false prophets are gone out into the world. That's 1 John 4:1. That's what this Texas history book says about the original settlers. They knew there were a lot of liars. They knew there were a lot of false scribes and Pharisees types. They knew there was a lot of nonsense. But the Bible was the way of finding what is true. And the Bible was the way of finding what is right and what to do. We choose truth, was the attitude. We choose what is right. And we can tell what you guys are talking about in the so-called philosophical non-Christian world. These are quotes from the Fehrenbach book. That's a long time ago, but it's continued 40 years since then. Light versus darkness, the great divide. And we can choose to believe what is true and do what is true. I added a few more pages. Now we're eventually getting to the final page. But since we were making some notes, I put all 50 states' preambles to their constitutions. The next two pages have Alabama to Wyoming. We are not going to read them all, but all of them kind of refer to God in their constitutions. And the author who wrote this, oddly enough, was a medical professor from Toledo. And he could figure out that all of the preambles of all of the state constitutions have references to God. We'll move to the final subject for today and the final page of the notes. It has the Texas Constitution. And I checked again to see if this is still the way the Texas Constitution reads, and it has not been changed. And this is still the way it reads. At the top, we have the preamble, the beginning. Humbly invoking the blessings of Almighty God, the people of the state of Texas do ordain and establish this Constitution. So, still begins this way, that we want God's blessings, and this is why we're making this Constitution. I drew around the Bill of Rights as far as running for office. It does not say you have to be a member of any denomination. It does not say what the doctrinal statement would be. You see the beginning of it, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification for office. But it does give this statement at the end, provided he acknowledged the existence of a supreme being. In other words, this is what the state wanted, still in there. Don't want atheists. Don't want atheists running for office. That's what it wanted. Now, the federal government has overturned this. The The state constitution still reads this way, and the government doesn't change it, but the federal government overruled it and said you can have atheists running for office. But this is what it still reads. And it's not like they get together down there in Austin and work on it to change it. Today, and I might do a 4th of July sermon after the 4th next week. I'll think about it. But today we have reviewed the Texas settlers. What did they think? They had Bibles. They had Christian morality. They believed in work ethics. They didn't like the elite who did not work. They did not like the beggars who were still healthy and would not work. They believed that they could pick their church leaders. They thought that they were leaving slavery to go to the promised land. That was kind of their attitude of moving here, kind of like leaving Egypt and going to the promised land. Even when they're rich people, they did not flaunt it and did not act like it. And I think a lot of people are that way today. They believed in education for children, boys and girls. They read the King James Bible at home at nighttime. They judged truth from error and right from wrong from the Bible. That's how it started. I think it's still that way in a lot of homes. Hope it continues that way. The musicians, please.